All right, hello everyone. Welcome to restorative practice. Today we will need two block-like structures of equal shape and size. You could also use couch cushions if they're fairly thick and kind of like the consistency of a couch cushion, which tends to be more dense than a pillow. So go ahead and grab maybe it's a hardback book. Maybe it's a couple of hardback books, although that's probably not going to give you the height you need. So now that I'm saying this out loud, I'd opt towards a couple of couch cushions because those will be thicker and taller. Unless you have some really large hardback books, totally fine to use those. And of course, if you have yoga blocks at home, use those instead. And so we're going to do, so this month we're focusing on spine strength and length and health and balancing the idea of strength and length in the spine. So our vinyasa practices will lend itself to more of the strengthening of the spine, and our restorative practices will lend itself more of the length or the just the relative health of the vertebrae. And so we're going to do most of our practice laying down on our bellies. We'll be kind of like face down for much of our practice, and we'll need our block-like structures or our couch cushions close by. And we're just going to take a very simple approach to this with minimal prop setup. But one more thing I do want you to grab is a blanket or a towel, something that you can roll up like a long sausage. And that's just going to stay at the end of your mat. It's going to be supporting your ankles so that it has something soft to lean into. And I'll show you what I mean by that. So heading over to the mat. Let me get my phone out of the way. I'm going to set my blocks off to the side, and then I'm going to roll up my blanket. Set that at the bottom of my mat. This is where my feet are going to go. And so I'm placing my feet like where the top of my ankle is on top of that blanket roll. And then I'm just going to take my hands, fold my hands underneath my forehead, take my elbows wide so I can get my chest on the ground, my belly on the ground, and I'm going to rest my forehead on the backs of my hands here. So start to join me in this shape. And as you come to this first shape, you might notice a couple things about your spine. And it might be different for each of you, what you're noticing, where you feel sensation, where you do not feel sensation. So just start to breathe a little bit deeper. See if you can breathe into your back, the intercostal muscles, the muscles in between your rib cage. Imagine inflating the back of your rib cage with your breath. We'll take about 3 more breaths here. It's worth noting that you're kind of in a very, very mild back bend in this shape. And so notice if you do feel any sensation in the lumbar spine or the low back, or even in the shoulders or the neck, just something to notice that those areas might be a little bit more sensitive, a little bit more tender. So you're just being mindful of things like that. Let's take one more breath here. And then we'll walk up to our elbows. So we'll lift our chest, we'll lift our head, And we'll come into a Sphinx pose, and this will be a supportive Sphinx pose, so we'll make it as passive as we can by adding props underneath the forehead. And so that might look like your couch cushions. You could stack them in front of your face. I'm going to use my block here, but you can bring as much height up underneath your face as needed so that it's comfortable for you. In Sphinx pose, something to note is the relationship of your elbows to your shoulders. So we don't want them winging out to the sides. We actually want them in line with the shoulders, so they're like on railroad tracks. And if that feels like way too much on the low back, then you just simply bring your hands straight forward instead of widening the elbows. So it would decrease the back bend. And then you can play with the height underneath the forehead, but I'm going to start to lower my forehead into my block. Once I've got my elbows in the right position, and then starting to settle in here, sometimes it feels nice. I like to roll my head side to side, so it's a little bit of a myofascial release for the tissue above the eyebrows. To the best of your ability, can you relax your shoulders? Relax the back of your neck. Soften your throat. You might even try swallowing. And then directing your attention, your awareness back to the breath. As you breathe in, imagine you could see this, you could visualize this, you could sense it. What would it be like to inflate the back of the rib cage with your air, with your inhale? And then soften everything on your exhale. As you settle into stillness, and we'll be in this hold for just a few minutes, not too terribly long, but as you're finding yourself settling here, if there's any tension that starts to creep back into the neck and the jaw and the head and the shoulders, just noticing that, and with an exhalation, imagine releasing that extra tension. Take about 1 more minute here. Last 3 breaths. And then as we come out of this, we'll take a counter pose before we head into our next long hold. And we'll do that by placing the hands underneath the shoulders, pressing up to hands and knees, and then all the way back to child's pose. So hips back to the heels, forehead resting on either the backs of your folded hands, one of your props, or forehead can rest on the mat, then you can let that happen. Take a deep breath into the whole spine. You could imagine the breath traveling all the way down the spine into the tip of your tailbone. And we'll take about 3 breaths here. Good. And then we're going to come forward again onto the belly. And this setup, I'd like to actually have you watch me first, and because it's hard to talk you through it when you're face down and not seeing what I'm doing. So this is where our 2 props of equal shape and size come in. So if you have those couch cushions, or if you have those really thick hardback books, you might want to wrap them in a blanket to give them a little extra padding. Or your blocks. I'm going to use my blocks for this. So I like a medium setting for my shoulders. This is what works for me. So I'm setting my blocks on my medium setting. And if you're trying to gauge that in terms of what you have at home, it's about like the height of my hand. So my wrist to my fingertips, that's about how high it is for me. It doesn't have to be what you choose, but I'm just helping you find a gauge. Okay, and then I'm gonna lean forward and rest my shoulders, the front of my shoulders and a little bit of my bicep on these blocks. I'm letting my head just relax between the blocks down onto the mat. And then I'm taking my hands just to an outstretched position, palms facing up. Okay, so belly down, forehead down, shoulders, a little bit of the front of the bicep is elevated on your prop. So if you haven't set that up, go ahead and do so now. Join me. It might take a little bit of adjusting and kind of figuring out where, equally from side to side, do you need to place your props on your shoulders? And sensation will vary for everybody. Maybe it feels like a whole lot of sensation. Maybe it feels like not that much sensation. If the sensation is to the point where it is excruciating and there's sharp shooting pain and you're not able to sustain this with a fluid, slow breath, then you'd want to back out. You'd want to just remove your props. You could come back to that first shape we took with the hands folded underneath the forehead, elbows wide. And if this, with the props underneath the shoulders, feels sustainable, we're going to stay here for about 3 minutes. And as usual in your restorative practice, the work that you do, your task right now, is to focus on your breath. Keep bringing your attention back to your inhale. Imagine inflating the back of the rib cage. And then on your exhale, imagine everything softening. See if you can just keep coming back to the breath over and over again. Let's take about 3 more breaths here where you're currently at. Then we'll gently move our props out of the way. You can press back to child's pose if you like, or you could just simply stack your hands underneath your forehead, elbows wide. The work that we're doing on the spine this month will be so helpful for those of us that work at our computers, that sit at desks for the majority of the day. Having a mobile, balanced in strength and length spine is so important if we do a lot of repetitive motion like sitting at a desk, working at a computer. All right, so let's set up our next shape. We can press up to hands and knees. And again, this is something you could watch. We've done this shape before, but again, it's another one of those that's kind of helpful to see before you get into it yourself. So if you want to watch me and then try the setup, I'm going to remove my blanket and just fold it kind of like the size of a little pillow. And I'm going to set that at the top of my mat. And that's just going to support the side of my head so that my neck isn't cranked, so that my neck gets to stay relatively vertical when I come down into this shape. Another belly down shape, we're going to work with the shoulders and the upper back. And so first of all, I'm going to rest my left cheek on my blanket, my right hand. So it's like I can look at my right fingertips. My right hand's underneath my right shoulder, and my left elbow is wide, like a half of a cactus shape. Left elbow is wide. Both palms are facing down. Pressing down into my right hand, I'm going to roll my weight onto my left hip. And then keep relaxing the head as I sweep my right foot behind me. And I actually have a pillow behind me, so my right foot gets to rest on that, which is really quite nice, actually. So if you want to add that into your shape, you can do that. You could also bend the knee and plant the foot. You can also stack the legs. You don't have to sweep it behind you, because this can be a lot. This can be a lot on the low back and the pelvis to add that rotation. A lot's happening in this shape. Okay, so key things to remember in this shape as you set up for yourself. Your left elbow, that's in a half cactus, at least the height of your shoulder. So wiggle those left fingertips forward, forward, forward until your elbow is in line with your shoulder or above it. Your head and your neck are supported so that your neck isn't being cranked. It's actually just relatively vertical. The whole spine is relatively vertical. Okay, and then that top leg, the right leg, is in a position that is sustainable for you. So there's not a lot of effort in the leg to get anywhere. It's something that you feel like you can hold for the next 3 minutes. And then, of course, the anchor in everything we do in our yoga practice is our breath. So can you take those deep breaths? Imagine breathing into the back body, the back of the spine. And when you breathe out, everything softens. If things get to be too painful, if it's not sustainable, if you notice there's too much tension in the body, you back out a little bit, you add more props, you modify, you change. You do not suffer because you think your shape should look a certain way. That would be counterproductive to your restorative practice. Let's take 3 more breaths on this side. Take your time on your exit. You can start to slowly roll back onto the belly. And then you can take a moment on your belly. You can stack your hands underneath your forehead. You can take your elbows wide. You could also press back to child's pose if you prefer that. We'll take 3 breaths. And then we'll start to set up our second side. And I really liked using those pillows to rest my foot on, so I'm gonna transition them to my second side. All right, so blanket, it's gonna rest on your right cheek. You're gonna be looking at your left fingertips. Right elbow, again, you want it in line with the shoulder or above the shoulder, but not below. Okay, so in line or above, but not below, so that we target the belly of the chest muscle and we don't stress out the anterior shoulder joint, ligament, and tendons too much. All right, so belly down. Maybe you're already there, in which case you can just ignore me and start to relax. But if you're not there yet and you're setting it up with me, right elbow off to the side in line with the shoulder or above. I'm resting on my right cheek. I'm looking at my left fingertips. I'm gonna press into my left hand to roll my weight onto my right hip. And then whatever you want to do with your left leg, it can stack, it can sweep behind you, it can rest on pillows like what I'm using. You can bend that knee and plant the foot. Let yourself explore that a little bit. Whatever you did on the first side, you don't have to do that on the second side. It can be something different. I'm going to set us a 3-minute timer here. And then using your breath as your anchor. It's a really helpful meditation technique that the breath is your anchor. It is your area of focus. And you don't have to stop your mind from thinking to be successful at meditation. That's one of the great myths of meditation. Actually, we can use anchor points, breath is my favorite, to focus the attention on a specific thing or object. And really the success in the meditation is when you notice, oh, I am not focusing on my breath anymore. I've started to let my mind kind of take over. I'm telling myself a particular story. I'm thinking about something that happened in the past, or I'm planning the future. You notice that, that's the success in the meditation. And you say, okay, I'm going to come back to my breath. I'm going to focus on my breath. It doesn't have to be judgment. It can just be gentle return to the breath. And you do that as many times as you need to, which means maybe thousands of times, millions of times, a lifetime of times, returning to the breath. A few more deep breaths here. See where you can relax a little bit more. Where can you effort less? Where can you do a little bit less? And then when you're ready, take your time, really mindful and gentle on your exit. You can start to roll back onto the belly. And those options of resting on your belly with your hands underneath your forehead or pressing back to child's pose. We'll take 3 breaths and then we'll transition into our final Shavasana. Your final Shavasana could be belly down, how we started, especially if you're really enjoying that shape. Feel free to stay there. If you prefer to come onto your back, you can transition, maybe place something underneath the backs of the knees, especially if what we did today was really a lot on your low back. Having a gentle support system underneath the knees can be really helpful. Settle in here for a minute. Relax the shoulders down the back. Lengthen out through the back of the neck. Take a deep breath in through the nose. Open your mouth, exhale. Let it go, let it rest. Shavasana. Please feel free to stay longer. If you have the time, if you need to move on with your day, start to awaken the body, fingertips, toes. You can move your head side to side. Eventually making your way off to a side from your back. If you're still on your belly, pressing up. Come into a final upright seat. We'll just take a few moments. Seated with the shoulders over the hips, ears over the shoulders. Notice how the spine feels now. What's changed, if anything? Notice how you feel. If you'd like to join me in closing out your practice, placing the left hand against the heart, stacking the right palm on top, bowing the chin into the chest, acknowledging this is my body, this is my breath, with reverence and gratitude for the practice, and to all of our teachers, past, present, and future, but most importantly to the teacher within your own heart. Namaste. Everyone, thank you so much for being with me today. I appreciate you showing up. Without you, this would not be a thing that I would get to share. So I hope it helps. And I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And I hope you come back again soon. Take care of yourselves in the meantime.